Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, Atlanta, rest of the world, Facebook, you who's there and you who's over there, and all of you who are live at the virtual studio of the Daily Huddle. I am honored to be with you on this Monday, June 15th. Today is somebody's birthday. Happy birthday. Woo! Sorrel, good morning.
Good morning, Giovanni. Good morning.
Great to be with all
Episode
of you.
number 61.
Episode 61. Oh my goodness, I am ready for a phenomenal conversation. And allow me to introduce our co-host, America's executive coach, Sorrel Catan. Good morning, Sorrel.
Good morning, Giovanni. My co-host is the #1 transformational leadership coach, my friend, my business partner, Giovanni Gonzalez. Gio, I have the pleasure of introducing, someone who's going to make you jealous. Right? I know you walk around thinking you're like my bestest friend, like that. Well, Rose trumps you, buddy. Well, this morning we have Rose Hampton with us. And Rose is a dear friend, very special to me. We do a lot of work together. I know Rose specifically like this. She came to my company when my company was nothing. And, I'm from Haiti. I might say, oh my God, she just did some voodoo. But literally, it happened that way. Rose was with us, and 6 months later, what was chaos became order. And what was unclear was so clear that the hiring decisions we were able to make are benefiting our company to this day. And it wasn't that the knowledge or the experience that Rose brought, but it was who Rose is that actually made us as a company shape up and become who we are right now. So Rose, myself, the 52 employees of QM3 Utility Services, Susan, and the world are really grateful for your work, your care, your love as a consultant. And what makes you really special today is your special relationship to one of the civil rights icons, Rosa Parks. And ladies and gentlemen, world, today Rose is here to answer this question from her perspective as a cousin. Who is Rosa Parks? Rose, thank you for being here and welcome.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I have to shake it up. That was such an amazing introduction. Oh my God, my heart is so full. You made me nervous. I wasn't. Anyway, good morning, everybody, and thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing in this conversation. And it really and truly is that. It's so interesting, when Sorrel gave me a call and said, Gio and I were talking, and we thought we'd, love to have you come and be a part of this particular conversation. I just started looking back. Well, what would I say? Who I'm expert in is cousin. And Sorrel said, okay, good, let's have that conversation. So let's have that conversation. All right, Sorrel, so I want to get up my picture book here. So let's see. You might have to help me out here, but I see.
All right, Giovanni will give you the authorization to share. Go ahead and make sure Rose can share, Giovanni.
Okay, great.
Yep. Go ahead, Rose.
Yeah? How are you doing?
There you go. It's all.
Okay, good. So let's see. Let's see if we can get slideshow. How about that? Yeah? How's that?
It's perfect.
Okay, good. Now, I'm not quite sure how the controls work, but when I hit the first button, we'll see, right? So from a cousin's perspective, who is Rosa Parks? Well, I propose that we answer that together at the end of the conversation. But I was just looking for one of Rosa's quotes to put on the front page of the file here. And this is the one that found. I mean, there are not a lot of them. But this one really jumped out at me, right? At the time I was arrested, I had no idea it would turn into this. It was just a day like any other day. The only thing that made it significant was that the masses of people joined in. Is that not prophetic? All right, so like I said to Sorrel, my expertise is cousin, right? If you really want somebody who knows every nit and in and out about Rosa Parks' life, a Black history scholar is probably more steeped in data than I am. But just so that we're all on the same foundation, we'll just do just a tiny bit of the Rosa Parks story, right? Okay. So Rosa was born Rosa Louise Macaulay, which is also my maiden name. And she was born in February in 1913. And her sunset was in October of 2005. Rosa Macaulay married Raymond Parks in 1932, and then she became Rosa Parks. It was her husband that actually introduced her to the NAACP. So she worked as a seamstress for a large department in the movements, which were actually just conversations at the time, in her off time. So she was secretary of the NAACP and other held other positions in activist organizations. And then we know in December of 1955, she was arrested for not giving up her seat on the bus to white passenger. So she was arrested, fingerprinted, and booked. But I want to just stop here for a second. And I want you to really, really look at these pictures. And these happen to be stock photos. We're going to get into some family album stuff in a little bit. But look at her. She's being fingerprinted, booked, and photographed. Do you see 1 ounce of fear, nervousness, concern of any kind? I mean, it is absolutely amazing. She didn't do a lot of speaking. And when she did speak, they were relatively short. She's really a very demure, quiet, shy, introverted kind of person, which is kind of interesting, right? But she stood somewhere, you know, and she was flat-footed about it, right? Unmoved in any way. And you can look at these pictures of her. This woman was absolutely free to choose being arrested, right? No fear, no concern, no nervousness. And she will tell you, and you'll hear it in any of her interviews. And they'll say, were you afraid? And she was like, I was not afraid. Were you nervous? I was not nervous. What did you say? He said, you know, to you, get up out of that seat or I'll have you arrested. What did you say? She said, sir, very respectful, very quiet. You may do that. I assert in that quiet that she got her commitment flat-footed. In that quiet that she got her courage unshakable. It was like, if you watch some of her interviews, it's very, very interesting. It's like the quiet is in the foreground and she's being with her memory of what happened and the speaking is in the background. It's a very different experience of a story being told. So remember the bus boycott? They stayed off. That lasted over a year. For Martin Luther King to step up and take leadership of the civil rights movement. For the filing of the Browder v. Gay lawsuit that was actually where the decision was made, excuse me, that segregation on Alabama transportation violated the Constitution. And interestingly enough, that was about 90 years after slavery had been abolished, right? And from that point on, Rosa was known as the mother or the first lady of the civil rights movement. So that's what happened, right? So we're all on the same page with that. But now there's someplace else I want to go with this conversation. I want to go to conversation, actually. So, you know, as I was putting this together, it occurred to me, you know, that what Rosa did, she was just an ordinary person who took an extraordinary stand, right? And yet, I wonder if she actually wasn't set up in some way for the role that she played in history. So when I think about, if you think about families, and you think about how we are predispositioned by our families, right? We've been, you know, we are absolutely influenced by our parents, and they're influenced by their parents, what's happened in the extended family, what's happened in the community, the culture, the events and experiences that they've been through, right? The rules, the norms, the ideologies of the family of the time. And it influences the way we think, the way we believe, and the way we behave. And so I'm going to refer to all of that as like the conversation that we're born into. Yeah. So I want to take a look at the conversation that Rosa Parks was born into. I mean, who knows what's in our, and what I call our ancestral consciousness. Because you know how sometimes something will come up in the family like, oh my God, you make that same gesture as your great Aunt Sally. Where did that come from? So we just don't know, right? The influences from our past. So a little history, right? To get present to the conversation that Rosa was born into. How am I time-wise?
15 after.
Okay, 6 minutes. So in the 1860s, right? This is the election of Abraham Lincoln, and then the secession of the southern states, the formation of the Confederate Army, and even the election of a Confederate president, right? Started the Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation, which I find just such an interesting document. The original intent of the Emancipation Proclamation was not to free the slaves. It was actually what would you call that? So like a ploy. You know, Lincoln's intention was to preserve the Union, and the slaves were actually resources to the Confederate Army. So it was Lincoln's original intention to usurp the resources of the Confederate Army, and it was a twofer, right? So even though, you know, it was the Emancipation Proclamation, it didn't have a lot of teeth in terms of giving freedom, and it only applied to the slaves who were a part of the Confederacy. And then we had, of course, the conclusion of the war in 1865 when Lee surrendered to Grant. And 5 days after that, Lincoln was assassinated, which many people assert through the civil rights movement back 100 years, because Lincoln did actually have a plan for the restoration of the African-American race to full citizenship that never occurred as a result of his assassination. And furthermore, his successor immediately started undoing everything that he could, right? So it was the 13th Amendment that actually abolished slavery, although interestingly enough, I believe it's in the 13th Amendment that it says those freedoms are extended except if you're a criminal. Oh, we have an issue with the criminal justice system. Isn't that interesting? But anyway, immediately, right, Jim Crow, black code and things like that begin to spring up to take back and or make sure. In some ways, you could even say to put the foot on the neck of the emerging freedom and affluence of the African-American community. And the rise of the Ku Klux Klan and the readmission of Alabama to the Union, because remember, not being a part of the Union, they were exempted from really participating fully in the government. They were militarily occupied in that. So all this is going on in the 1860s, right? And then in the 1890s, and there's so many other of these landmark cases that we could refer to. I mean, I just got familiar with Greenwood last night for the first time. But there's Greenwood, there's Rosewood, there's Wilmington, and the destruction of the Black Wall Street and all of that. So there's lots of things that show that this suppression has been pretty cyclical for quite a long time. And so in 1890, this Plessy versus Ferguson, who was a 1/8 African American, took a seat in the whites only section on a train in New Orleans, Louisiana, was asked to move, did not do that. He was, actually did this intentionally, was arrested, convicted of violating Louisiana's Separate Car Act. And that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, who actually affirmed the conviction and then set loose the separate but equal proliferation in the states at that time. So all of this is going on in the 60s, in the 90s. Now, here comes a family that's rising with the same tide as these events in civil rights. So here we go, right? I'm going to show you Rosa's great grandparents, which we work the dates backwards, and we think they're kind of right, mostly right, really pretty darn close. So here's Rosa's great-grandparents, born in the 1830s. So they would have been in their maturity around the 60s, right, at the time of all of that Lincoln history, right, Confederacy. All right, so here's Colonel Henry McCauley, who was married, but then after that marriage had a relationship with Yogi, we don't have a last name, who was a Poarch Creek Indian in Alabama. Colonel McCauley, we believe, was a colonel in the Confederate Army, although the other possibility is, the slave traders were actually called colonels. So that's a possibility. But based on the timing, we think that the Confederate Army was the right casting for Colonel McCauley. And so Henry and Yogi had 2 children together. One of them was Anderson, and that's Rosa's grandfather. Clendenin Collins, who was a plantation owner, had 2 children by Elizabeth, who was a slave on his plantation. And then he later married. He and his wife actually had 2 children of their own. Elizabeth ended up with her boy, and Clendenin loved Louisa and took her into the house and raised her with his children, although she was Black, so she couldn't have quite equal status with his children. But you can see she looks fairly well taken care of, yes? And this was Rosa's grandmother. Okay, so we have Anderson Louisa, born in and around the 60s, and they had 13 children. 2 of those 13 children were Rosa's dad, James, and my grandfather, Robert. There were 13 children. 7 of the children actually died all at one time. There's a family monument with all 7 names inscribed. There are 2 family stories. One, they were poisoned biscuits baked by a neighbor. The other, family drama, right? The other story is there's some residual pandemic. So the Spanish flu and other things were around. There was a residue of those were around at the time. But 2 of the survivors were James and Robert. Rosa's dad, my granddad. So Rosa's dad, James McCauley, married Leona Edwards, and Rosa was born February 1913. There she is as a babe. So here's a better picture of her. Look at that little girl. Look at her. She's adorable, right? Here's another picture. family picture of James, Leona, and Rosa. Right? She looks like maybe 3. Does that look like a little girl who doesn't think she's somebody? I mean, look at that. Look at it. When I look at this picture and I look at their presentation, I know that child was raised with full confidence, self-confidence in who she was and what she was capable of. This is Rosa. I had to throw this in here, but we don't have time. My grandfather, my grandmother, and the little guy in the ring, my dad. And oh, by the way, Rosa had one brother, Sylvester, and my dad. They look like cousins, don't they? They look like they could be brothers. But we're deep in the family album, so let's get back. All right. So here's my dad and Rosa at one of our family reunions. Rosa's brother left the South, moved to Michigan, and eventually Rosa's dad left the family, and Rosa gravitated towards my dad and his sisters. Those were her surrogate siblings. So we got to spend time with her. But when we were together, she did not, please hear me, not want to talk about that. She didn't want to talk about the Alabama bus boycott. She didn't want to talk about speaking. She didn't want to be asked those questions. She wanted to do just what we're doing, right? Have a cup of tea and look through family pictures and play quietly. She loved family. So she was there, right? Weddings, funerals, family reunions. I mean, look at the joy on her face in that picture. Devoted to her mom, caregiver. Just, you know, a collage of stuff from the family album. There's this one picture of Rosa, my brother Bill, and I. She wintered, when she lived in Michigan, she wintered in Los Angeles. And my brother lived in the San Francisco area, and he'd drive down every summer, spend time with her, bring her back. So they were very close, and this was one of those visits. We were with her when her museum was opened in Montgomery, Alabama, and we were invited when the actual bus was restored and placed in the museum in Detroit. And we were always invited when she got her Medal of Freedom from Bill Clinton. She just made sure that we were included. She loved us, we loved her. Family reunion, and these were, you know, in her later years. She was at my dad's sunset celebration, and we were at hers. This is that same brother that I was showing you a little bit earlier, who had the privilege of representing the family at her funeral. And you know, is delighted to this day that he got to sit next to then Senator Barack Obama on the dais, and one of several of her final funerals. So that is Rosa from a cousin's perspective.
That was
daughter.
great.
She's a daughter. She's a wife. She's a community activist, a sister, an aunt, and a cousin. And how I knew her was cousin. So that's the story from a cousin's point of view. And normally at this point at the Daily Huddle, you know, we would open it up to questions, but I would actually like to turn, to flip the script just a little bit. And I would just like to ask you, who do you say Rosa Parks is? Who do you say you are? Who were you set up to be? And do you have the courage to be a stand for what you're committed to, like Rosa? What do you say?
Well, that is perfect. And we'll let Karina speak to that first.
Well, first of all, Rose, it was so wonderful to hear you share all of this. And I remember the day that I was looking at your autobiography and I saw the picture of Rosa and I said, is this the Rosa Parks, you know? And I had known you already for quite some time, so you were so quiet about that. Who do I say that I am? I mean, I will say that when I was in high school in New Hampshire, I read about the civil rights movement and Rosa Parks. And I created a sit-in as a kid. I created a sit-in in my high school because I felt like, wow, New Hampshire doesn't observe Martin Luther King holiday as a holiday. And I'd learned about this thing called peaceful protesting. And so who I say that I am is, you know, I love how you speak about Rosa as someone who's quiet, right? But confident and has something to say. And I remember them talking about how they selected her, right? Other people had said, no, I'm not going to give up my seat, but Rosa was the one that was selected. So, you know, in my life as an artist, there are times that I choose to be outspoken about inequalities, or, you know, the work I've done with about gun violence and looking at who people are as targets, right? And in this whole time, I noticed that I've been very quiet. Like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. And so I just love the way you said everything you said about Rosa. And I would say I'm someone who's quiet, but has a really strong voice and loves human beings, all human beings. And right now I've been grappling with like how to express that in a really good way.
Thank you, Karina.
Yeah. All right, I want to leave time for other people to share.
Thank you, Karina. And that's who you say you are. James. Sheila, it's your turn.
Okay, great. Rose, that was just spectacular. And, you know, I say that Rosa Parks was quiet, with a soft heart and the beingness of a lion, of a lioness. You know, like, don't get it. She was kind of like, in her demeanor, don't get it twisted. So that was really beautiful. And, you know, I'm going to be on the Daily Huddle Thursday, and I'm going to introduce part of in my speech, Sorrel and Gio. I actually create my defining moment when I became of the movement. I'll create that with you. And, you know, who I say that I am is a voice for what's possible.
This is great.
And that is who I am.
Thank you.
That is who you are.
Great.
Okay, who do you say you are?
I am woman, hear me roar. Yeah, I couldn't help but think when you were talking about how it all with Rosa Parks, is that if she had been a man, a Black man, how different that would have looked. And I think as a woman and as women, we have an extra responsibility of stepping up and being seen and protesting. And I know for me, as a white woman brought up in a very Black and white world, of racially a Black and white world, that I still struggle with, how do I show up? How do I show my support without offending my Black friends? And how can I be there? And I think that that's part of my woman, hear me roar, is I'm roaring inside and I want to stand up, and I don't want to take away or step on those that are important, that this is all about. And I really appreciate you telling her story. And I appreciate the ongoing conversations that we're having now with everything that's happened. So I know it's kind of a heavy story, but I do think that if Rosa Parks had been a man, it would have been a very different story, and it saddens me all the way around. So I just want to say I'm sorry for this, for where we are in our country right now.
Thank you for that, Lori Kay. Yeah. I look forward to the day when you don't have to ask yourself that question, how? That is very natural and easy, and it's just, you can just be with what's so, because it's easy to be with what's so, which is not the case right now. Thanks, Lori Kay.
So, partners, I want to acknowledge the meat in the conversation, and Rose, we want more of you, and we're going to take more of you. Do I have the permission from you to keep you and have Andrea, Mary Pat, and Marie Frattoni comment?
Sure, absolutely. For anybody who can hang around.
All right, so it's 9:33. We normally end at 9:30. And if you have to go, go ahead. But we'll stay here and hang out with Rose. And Andrea, you're next.
Rose, that was fantastic presentation. And to answer your question quickly, how do I present myself or who I am? I'm truly not like Rosa, that she was quiet, I'm not. So what I use is my voice, and driven by passion. I am a passionate individual who is open to get educated about the things that I have not experienced, but I'm seeing as my Black brothers and sisters are experiencing, and I'm open to get educated and use that knowledge driven by the passion I have. So that will be my answer to your question. But truly, I'm not like Rosa Parks, quiet. I don't stand up by sitting down. I am loud. But I try to get educated and use it.
Thank you, Andrea. It's interesting. I can see it's all useful, the peaceful protesting and really the speaking out, right? The raising of voices and joining together and all of that. And what we have to do is we just have to remember, sometimes it's what needs to be put in, and sometimes it's what needs to be taken out. So,
absolutely.
Right? So we have to honor both spaces. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This was very inspiring, Rose.
All right, Mary Pat. Mary Pat, you're on mute.
Rose, thank you so much. And thank you for your heart this morning. And I think what came up for me is I am a stand. I am a stand for humanity, totally. And what was there was what your quote at the beginning, her sitting down, she had no idea that it would cause the ruckus in the masses. Now, I'm not against people standing with her, but I am against people taking violent actions. That's the piece I don't know how to deal with, because that's not who I am. I'm a person who's calm and gentle and a lioness. I'm not going to stand. If I see something on the street, I will walk straight into it and say, this is not, whether it's a child being abused by a parent, for unnecessarily, whoa, stop, is what I usually say. Whoa, stop. So thank you for really igniting my heart in a new way. So thank you for that this morning.
Thank you, Mary Pat. I know, right? I'm extending this time, but I just have to say something very quickly. I totally get that. And when I see, buildings on fire and windows smashed, my immediate reaction is the same as yours. And yet, going through this and getting prepared for today, when I thought about what's in the ancestral consciousness of people, and I look back at the history that we've come from and the violence suffered by the African American community, extreme violence suffered by the African American community. I don't know. I don't know what the impetus is for that kind of behavior, but just maybe, it's just what's so, because it's just been what was so for those communities, I don't know. But we're challenged to be with it, because guess what? It's happening.
Yeah, right. No, I love that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mary Pat. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for giving me the opportunity to share that.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Marie Fertoni.
Thank you, Sorrel. Rose, thank you. That was just so inspiring, really great. And you know, what I'm present is, how am I like Rosa? I don't know. I I think I can be a quiet leader. I can also be a loudmouth on loudspeaker. And I think what I just got present to in this whole talk was that I don't really know history. I mean, a lot of where you started, I mean, when some of this happened in 1955, I was 5. So I didn't even have the age of reason at that point. But I grew up in schools that were very inclusive and were loving humanity, and community is a big thing for me. And I just am like in awe that, you know, some of us here are landmark wisdom graduates, and so I'm going to use a wisdom term here for a moment. But I was really just got present to the fact that Rose has been in my originating circle for a long time, meaning she's somebody that I'm in communication with often. And to have Rosa Parks in her originating circle is amazing. So my circle is connected to Rosa's circle, which makes me family with Rosa Parks. And it's just incredible, you know, to have that kind of a person who stood and turned a tide. And so how I can be like that is, I just feel like, I just keep saying it, I like to put the microphone on somebody else, and then I'm present to the fact that I know incredible people that do incredible things, or have done incredible things, or are connected to incredible things, and to shine the light on them so that other people can have an opportunity to see that. Because I can be a lion and a lamb with all of that. And I just want to also say, in that, with all of what's going on in the Black Lives Matter move, I mean, I tried to say something to my community last week or the week before, because it felt like a lot of leaders were sharing things about where they were standing here. And it was a time where I absolutely felt inadequate. I felt uneloquent. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to say it. And that's where I feel like I don't know the right words to say, other than I'm bothered, I'm upset, my heart breaks. And, you know, to just be present and so intimate related to this conversation through you, Rose, and your family, it's absolutely miraculous that we're in this space right here, like literally on the Daily Huddle. So anyway, I'm learning. I'm considering myself a good student, and thank you for just listening in the conversation.
You're very welcome, Marie. You know, where I stand is that each one. So that means you all share the relationship in some way with me, with Rosa Parks. So how about that?
Giovanni, would you go off mute, my friend? And
Yes.
Lost in thought.
This is definitely a lost in thought kind of moment, and where my loudness and my passion all come together into reflection, to an opportunity of a reflection. You know, I'm a man who was born in Colombia, so there is a background of being a Hispanic man who did not inherit this beautiful history that you shared with us, and I inherited another one. You know, I inherited the genocide of the Spaniards, who absolutely abolished all the Indians, and there's not even history of our Rose Parks, right? So then I'm like super passionate about that as well, right? And but you know, one of the things that I was so in love with, and I'm like so moved by today's Daily Huddle, is, Rose, how you brought history, and then a touch of family, and then a challenge to look at my leadership and see where do I stand, and how do I represent my stand, or, you know, what's going to be my self-expression around this. And you know, one thing I was clear was Rose Parks was not quiet. That is not quiet. You know, we're still talking about her, and the stand that she was at the bus and the stand she was for history, and there is the kind of leadership that she was in touch with that allowed for many years after to be inspired by. And so I'm committed to find out more about that kind of leadership and be a stand and have a voice to that. So that's what I wanted to say, Rose. Thank you really so much for creating this space. I just can't wait to go over to your house and bring pizza, and so I can have like 3 hours more of you. Okay, this was beautiful. Thank you, Sorrel, Mary, and everybody who has Rose as their original circle. I feel a very special human being because I'm being part of this conversation. That's what I wanted to say, Sorrel. I can go on. I mean, I'm like,
I know you could. I know you could. And, you know, sadly or happily, we do need to close today. And Marie, I love what you said when you talked about giving someone else the microphone. And so in closing, I want to give someone else the microphone, and that's someone who's listening from Haiti, answering your question, Rose. And he says, who do I say I am? The only time when I lose my confident strut is when I witness injustice. I become as vulnerable as the victim, and I feel what they feel. I am that individual who stands for others harder than I stand for myself. I am a stand. I am a protector. I am a change worker.
Mm.
And so our voice speaks loudly through each other.
Mm.
And so I'm present to, when I'm quiet, I'm just like Andrea. And when I'm loud, I'm just like Marie. And when I'm Haitian, I'm just like you, Gio. I love y'all.
Sorrel, I just left you something on the chat, Sorrel.
All right, I'll look at it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Bye.
Wonderful.
You're
Gio, anything you need to say that I should be saying based on the chat you sent me?
Okay, thank you, Sorrel. So Rose, thank you, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I just wanted to let you know that here at the Daily Huddle, we're committed to continue this conversation. So not this Saturday, but the following Saturday, we're going to be having kind of a town hall, a panelist conversation called Black, Brown, and White, Ending Inequality and Injustice. And I just left the link on the chat so that you guys can register, so you guys can be part of it. And we'll be telling you more about it as we go. I would love to have all 100 people that are committed to this conversation or more. That's what I wanted to say, Sorrel. Rose, what are your last words?
So 2 quick things. First of all, yes, it was the quiet that shook the world. So just consider that it was the quiet that shook the world. And to our friend in Haiti, I would say, you know, thank you for being upset when you're present to the injustice. Thank you for being present and willing to be moved by being present. Just like Rosa was moved to sit still. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Rose,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, guys. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Another amazing conversation.
Karina.
Have an awesome day.
Thank you.